Good afternoon, welcome to the second last session. So my name's Kyrsten Black. I'm a new member of the team at QAA. This is day 11 for me, so be kind, okay? So we've had, I just wanted to sort of stop and pause and say, how amazing have our speakers been this afternoon? This afternoon and this morning, all day. It's been absolutely splendid. And I think what I have noted in all the discussion is every single person we've heard from in terms of questions, in terms of presenters, it's all been about what is best for the student journeys to give the students the very best opportunity of success. And I think we've been blessed to be in a room with those presentations today. So thank you very much to everybody for their inputs on the discussion. So I've got a few questions that I'm going to ask our team this afternoon. So I think, we've got Nicola, we've got Phil, and we've got Luke. So I'm going to ask my first question. So what have you learned about the tertiary sector during your projects?
Everyone looking at me, that's fine.
Got time to think then.
I think probably we've talked a lot about assumptions, and I think already in a short space of time it started to serve me to challenge my assumptions, and I think your projects will do that. Where I'm probably pleased is that certainly from our work and what I'm hearing today, there's kind of two things. I think the main barriers and the challenges I see are things that are within our gift to resolve. For example, language, terminology. But actually, when you break away from that and get back into principles and the values and what are we trying to do, there was clear alignment. So I think that was probably the biggest learning that I've found, that actually from the institutions, it was quite clear that everyone in the room had very clear and driven values and principles around what we were trying to do. We didn't understand each other, but that we can solve that, and actually a lot of things that prevent it can be solved, definitely from a practitioner level. There are bigger things that need to be solved, but I think that real core of why we're all doing what we're doing shone through, and that was really encouraging.
I think you just stole my line, because I was going to say the same things, that the will of what we're all trying to achieve is aligned. And actually, to come back to what Josh was saying in his presentation, the thing that creates that competition between us is actually the way that we're funded, rather than us necessarily want to be in conflict and competition with each other. We want to work together, but the funding doesn't allow us to do that in a way that really helps us to focus on having those clear and fully supported student journeys that do the best for the individual.
Yeah. So there's this shared goal of shared outcomes and shared goals. Luke?
Yeah, I think one of the big things I've taken away from this is, and I suppose it echoes a lot of an educational change pieces around how you build the confidence of the people who are participating. Mm-hmm. You know, Phil's project is great fun for me because I just sit back and listen. You know, and so I've now stolen teach less, learn more. I've now stolen the lecturer shouldn't be the busiest person in the classroom. Because you keep saying it, and it's absolutely right. But actually, that understanding that the strengths and the weaknesses of both all institutions, at all levels, you know, how do you identify those strengths? How do you identify those weaknesses? And I think it's certainly to people. You know, anybody from Abertay will heard me hear me say this about 50 million times. But you know, there's a way in which whatever you do on a daily basis in a college or a university, you see as ordinary. Mm-hmm. You know, other people see it as extraordinary. Yeah. And sometimes you need to hear that from other people, and that's what the collaborations do. Wow, you do that. And there's some of the work at Dundee and Angus where they're working with employers, and I'm going, I wish we could work with employers like that. That's absolutely brilliant. Yeah. But it's hearing it from somebody else, and that validation piece that actually what we do is pretty good is actually quite reassuring for everybody, I think.
Fabulous. The next area of question for you is around unintended consequences. So you started these projects, you had your project plans. I think you've all sort of talked about sort of a changing focus within the project. But was there some outcomes from the project that you weren't anticipating, but that have been absolute benefits to the project?
I did mention it in my presentation, and the unintended consequence is definitely the meta skills which I put in, not really thinking that that was going to be the most interesting data that I got back, but actually it's turned out to be the bit that I'm actually really, really interested in. I'm interested in why why those particular skills are the ones that we're focusing on and the ones that we're not focusing on. Why are we not doing that, and how do we then plug that gap? Because we do need to develop leadership skills, we do need to develop curiosity in order to support students to engage. So that was definitely an unintended consequence that I hadn't really anticipated.
So possibly a stage 2 of the project.
Is there any money?
I'm not at liberty to say. What about yourself, Luke? Unintended consequences?
I suppose, yeah. I mean, for me, there's, so sorry to sound grand, but I'm interested in institutional change pieces and how we, as an institution, work differently with people, and so there's that layer which I'm thinking about. So, one of the unintended consequences is that we're actually reviewing our learning and teaching strategy at the university, and now we're going to call it a student success strategy, because actually it's all about access, success, etc. And because of discovering over the first 6 months of the project how brilliant colleagues were at Dundee and Angus, we said, okay, well actually, can you come in and do a sort of provocative talk to staff at the university around the student success strategy, around the fact that actually the next generation of students are going to look like this. These are the ways in which they're learning. These are the things we need to reflect in our curriculum. And that wasn't planned at the beginning, but it became evident through as we were sharing experiences and sharing insights that actually that could be quite a provocative thing for our staff to hear about. So for me, that was an unintended one. And I think the other unintended one is still unintended. I don't know, because there are so many conversations going on, and I don't want to control them. Just keep talking.
Sorry to interrupt. Would you mind just speaking?
Sorry, apologies.
Sorry. And that must be quite a change to go from a learning and teaching strategy to a student success strategy. Yeah, that's fantastic.
It's deliberate.
Yeah, no, absolutely fantastic. Phil?
Yeah, I think there's lots. I described it as messy, because that's the work that we do, is messy, and it changes day to day. I think probably one of the unintentional pieces for me is a bit of a personal one, and this is, something for you all to consider, is that in a real short space of time, I've developed in relationships with colleagues that I would maybe never have met. And I mentioned Jennifer Lowe as an example, who's deputy principal at New College, Lanarkshire. I'd never met her before in my whole 20 years in FE. And now I regularly pick up the phone to her and talk about all things that we're doing within an institution, and I'm now going to New College Lanarkshire and looking at how they do other things, and I think for me that's a real unintended consequence. But the strength of that, if you imagine that being magnified through all your projects, the power of that, the connections, because let's face it, education, we're all shifting roles and titles and institutions, but actually the collaboration and the relationships that will come out of that, I think will also lead on, and are already leading into other bits of work that are disconnected to QA. So I think it's fostering that. The STEP will foster, numerous enhancement projects, planned and unplanned.
Thank you very much for that. Within the room, there are a number of people that are involved in the STEP projects. Being honest, what challenges did you encounter, Nicola?
I'm going to have to use this mic now, aren't I? The perennial challenge, as ever, is time. If I could carve out an extra day of the week where I could devote that to my enhancement project, that would be really good. Education establishments are busy places, and that's why I love working in education, because you call it messy, I call it mental. It's exactly the same thing, but I thrive off of that energy, and so and I love doing things like this, doing different things, working with different people, getting the opportunity to learn myself through doing these types of things. But you've got to be honest about what your capacity is, and that becomes quite difficult because I quite like to say yes to a lot of things, and I'll do that, and I'll do that, and then, but you know, there is, and we all suffer from cuts to our funding. There's no other way to put that. And the more that's taken away from us, the more that the people that are left take on, and we end up having to shoulder quite a lot. So that's part of the challenge.
So keeping it real.
Yeah.
Look.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely echo that. I mean, I work with some fabulous people in this room, Julie, Jack, Dunia, Sophie, various other people. We all have a busy day job, but this is the best stuff I do. It's exciting. Yeah, it's new, it's different, and being very old and being around the block a fair few times, these are the things that you need to prioritise. Yeah, because actually it's the only opportunity you get to instigate real change. Because much as I try and modify a policy here or make something happen, actually, this is about really working for the benefit of students across our partners and across our university. And therefore, actually, we need to invest time in it, and therefore protecting that and making it happen is absolutely key. So if you do get on these STEP projects, commit to them, that's what I'd say, because you're going to get so much out of it that actually will benefit your institutions, your students, or it might even, as in Phil's case, get a promotion.
Unintended.
Congratulations.
Phil, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I would ring true about the time, but I guess what I would suggest, depending on your role, I'm in a more senior position in my institution, but what I'm asking is for my lecturing staff to engage in the project. That only becomes possible because I'm encouraging them to do that. I am giving them permission to step out of those day duties and come away for the day and experience, because I know the value of that. So I guess each of you within your institutions, regardless of your role, it's about advocating for the value of this and finding some way, if you can, to carve that time. And it doesn't always have to be at night after dinner and you've put the kids to bed and you've done all that, but actually within the institution. It is difficult, but there's value in this, and I think there are ways that you can carve it that allows you to do that. But I think if I reflect on what Nicola said, it is really important to make sure that if you're doing it collectively, that everyone pulls together on that, because there have been times in our project where actually my work pattern has meant that I really was pushed for time, but Jennifer has then stepped in and taken the load, and we've shared that between us, and Luke's helped us, and everyone's kind of pulled together. So actually doing it on your own, very difficult, but it's about working together to alleviate your collective time. But I think probably go back to your institutions and be the champion of this, and find ways for those in the more senior positions to support you, to find some space.
Yeah, I was going to say something very similar in terms of, being in a senior leadership position in our own organisations. It is important for us to understand that challenge of time and to make sure that we build that capacity, protect it, see the value in it. And if we can do that and have a kind of leadership approach to that and leading in terms of ensuring that, then that shows, I think, our staff and our students that we're invested in this, because we know that that's going to make a difference for the future, and that's really what's important to us. And everything that QE is supporting us in doing, and all the future projects, is all about improving that student journey and making sure that individuals get the best possible opportunity to get whatever qualification it is that they want to get.
One of the themes that have come out yesterday and today a little as well is around the sort of partnerships, so the sort of consultative partnerships and the collaborative partnerships. I don't know if you'd each be willing to say a little bit about that and about the importance of that, I think particularly for those that are involved in projects going forward.
You spoke very well there about the collaboration between you and Jennifer. So I'll maybe speak a wee bit about the consultative part of it, because that is absolutely key. It's great to have consultative partners where you can go and say, here's what I'm thinking. They've not been working with you on it, so they're coming to it totally fresh and with a critical eye, and having a range of consultative partners. So I've got consultative partners from SCQF, SWAP, the college sector, university sector. So my consultative board, if you like, and Alison as well from QE Lens, gives me a real well-rounded feedback and good counsel coming from different directions. So they're absolutely key in terms of helping me to not analyse, but synthesise my thoughts and make sure that what I'm planning on doing is right, but also then impacting on that. So the consultative part of it is very critical, as well as the collaborative part.
So you're getting that sort of clarity of thought and triangulation to help you take it forward.
Yeah, definitely.
That's fab. Would anybody else like to comment on the collaborative or consultative partners?
Probably just think about how you're going to manage that collaboration, but from a really practical point of view. You know, I've got a bucket on my planner about QA project and it, you know, working with people who manage some of my daily work to make sure that that's part of it, and think about the tools and the mechanisms that you're going to do. I think one of the key things is that we've probably struggled with it is momentum, and particularly when you're trying to pull teaching staff together and staff from different roles, momentum, because big spaces between activities and things like that. So the collaboration is think quite practically about how will we do that, and that's why we were thinking about, you know, digital sites and how we could keep people informed. We've learned a lot about how to do it, how not to do it. It is a challenge when people are moved and swathed by timetables and institutional operational things. So I think really think about the detail of how you're going to collaborate and keep that collaboration managed, flowing and ongoing.
Yeah, I was just going to add, there's entire books, I think, on collaborative leadership theory. Yeah. Collaborative leadership doesn't mean you abscond and it's somebody else's fault. It still means you need to lead. And so if you are taking part in these workshops, make things happen. Yeah. And again, I'm really lucky. I've got colleagues at DNA and Abate who are challenging and questioning and whatever. But you know, you just need to keep it ticking over, because you know, all these projects, all they really need, in classic change words, you know, is momentum. Yeah. Get it started, get it rolling, and as soon as it's rolling, suddenly you find people are going off on one and just let it go.
Fab. What benefits can tertiary enhancement projects bring to the wider sector? Now that's a big question.
Coming back to something that I mentioned was a common language. I think, and you mentioned that as well, Phil, about, and I do think we have some commonalities in our language, but I still think there's more work we can do in and around that. One of the things, just in general, about the enhancement projects, but also about just the QAA, the new tertiary enhancement review process, is, I think, as a country, what we're doing is really putting at the forefront equity. We are moving into a system and a review process where individuals with complex needs and disabilities who are maybe operating at SEQF level 1 are going to have their courses reviewed in the same way as a PhD course. And I don't think we're making enough of that. That's real equity in our system, that regardless of what you're doing in that tertiary space, your course is just as important as anybody else's. And I think that's what not only the enhancement projects are going to bring to the fore, but also the new evaluation process. And I'm quite passionate about that.
I can tell. A few days a week I work for another institution that's truly tertiary, and I have to say that parity of esteem and equity is absolutely critical, and I think will be critical as these projects move forward.
Okay.
Phil?
Sharing teaching practice. That's it. I think that probably, and by that I mean there's amazing stuff that happens, and there's amazing stuff that happens across institutions, and I see this as an opportunity through QA to really be a catalyst for fast-tracking the sharing of that, breaking down silos quite quickly, and ultimately that is where the students within our institutions are spending a lot of their time, in those teaching spaces and in those rooms. And if you can, the size of the tertiary sector, the practice that can be shared and disseminated, I think is potentially quite exciting.
sharing learning practice. And I think creating that greater understanding between universities and colleges, so that universities understand how students have learnt previously and how students have been assessed, and better reflect that in the design of those courses.
It's big.
Well, we're not here to answer the small questions.
No, we're ambitious. This is we're very ambitious. Okay, this is the last of my questions, and we'll open it up to the floor for some questions. So, which one piece of advice would you give to our STEP project teams as they develop and deliver their tertiary enhancement projects?
You can see the thinking faces have went on right away.
There's close up, there's very big thinking faces.
I've got one. Be ambitious, because why not? Yeah. I mean, this is an opportunity when you've got these projects. You've got a little bit of funding, probably. It won't be a lot of funding, but you might have a little bit of funding. But you're going to have the space created to try things and to challenge things and to think differently. And this is one of those rare opportunities where, when you're part of one of these, you can perhaps say things you might not say within your own institution, to actually challenge the way we do things as a sector. So I would say grasp it and be ambitious.
Yeah. And use that additional potential sort of opportunity for power's maybe too great a word, but for leverage within your organisations. Brilliant. Thanks, Luke. Nicola.
I've got two pieces of advice. One, if you are trying to get information and you're trying to gather data, really think about who you want. Really think about how you're going to get that data. And get that right person in the institution that's going to give you it. And that kind of follows on to my next, piece of advice is both of us in our projects have realised that actually 12 months was very ambitious, which we should be. But be realistic about the timeline. I'm sure everybody in here has experience of doing DIY. I'll paint that room in 2 hours, no problem at all. 4 days later, you're still there, right? Being really realistic about what you can achieve in your timeline, because what that will do is take a wee bit of pressure off and really allow you then to do the deep, rich, exploratory work that you really want to do without thinking, oh, I've got this timeline, sitting on my shoulder.
I think maybe for me, one of my reflections around would be, if there's people involved, from your institution, staff, for example, think about students, think about the makeup of those people, think about the voices that you're hearing, and don't fall into the trap that actually what you've got is a nice little echo chamber of people who are like-minded. All of us are in this room for particular reasons, but there's lots and lots of other people working in our institutions that are maybe not on board, or who are more hesitant, for example, about sharing their teaching practice. And one of the things that I'm interested in is how do we get to them? And you might want to think about that as you're framing your organisations. If you're thinking about student voice, who are the voices that we're unlikely to hear or haven't traditionally heard, or can we get to them? And that is part of the ambition. But thinking about your staff, because really it's getting maybe some of the people who are less likely to be involved in this piece of work in an institution, can you get them involved? Because that will have much bigger impact and transformational impact beyond your project than it will with those who are already engaged, excited and want to do the work. So that's maybe something I'd reflected on and might be worth considering.
Yeah, I was just going to add on top of what Phil was saying there. Again, one of the things we always try and do is identify the influencers within your institution. Yeah, that doesn't mean they're the senior managers sometimes. That means they're just the people who, the glue. Mm-hmm. Yeah, whether that be in professional services, whether that be within an academic department, whatever. Who are the people that people listen to? Get some of them on board, because then suddenly you'll find, as you say, that the word gets spread and the momentum happens and all those bits and pieces. But yeah, so do a bit of planning in that regard.
Fabulous. So there's a few messages there around using the networks and the communities that exist already, but not just necessarily the people in the room, but the the people in the room who know the people in the institutions who, you know, and use that broad network of opportunities. And I think, Phil, your point about, you know, engaging with those less likely to be engaged, so, you know, potentially the apprentices, potentially the distance learners, etc., to make sure that all voices are being heard and not necessarily the ones that are easier to get to, because I think that's really critical. I'd like to open up. I've been hugely selfish and got through the list of questions that I wanted to be asked. So, opening up to the tables, would anybody like to ask any questions of the panel?
Thank you. I'm Valeria Ramos from City of Glasgow College, and I wanted to ask, in terms of that sharing of learning and practices and things, what ways in your guys' institutions have you used to be able to, or previously, to be able to get to those voices that you, maybe as institutions, could not hear from? And I'm just asking as a student representative myself, because there are groups that it's very difficult to get their voices from. So yeah, if you could just kind of share. Thank you.
Student groups?
Yes, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, probably what I would say is it links back to that students being surveyed to death. I think probably what you need to have is mechanisms that are, you know, both formal and informal. You know, yesterday I was walking around my institution over lunchtime, and the main priority there was talking to students, and I talked to a range of students. To me, sometimes that's the best way to open the doors. And then from those individual conversations, I think sometimes we feel it has to be institutional and approaches. Organisations have to have multiple approaches, but I think sometimes actually going to those informal settings, and if that's perhaps a theme in your project, thinking about that is actually how do we gather feedback informally, organically, but still in a meaningful way that we can do something with it, because the reality is a lot of that's about connection. Certain people won't talk to you if they don't know who you are, for example, they've never seen you before. So,
one of the ways that we've tackled it is, I'm sure a lot of the students on here are familiar with a class rep system, and you know, we, as many other organisations, had class reps, and it was the same framework and same when we approached it for every curriculum area. And to be honest, that didn't work. So we have done a lot of work around about thinking, well, how do we engage with? So, for example, one of the curriculum areas that did not engage well with the class rep system was our construction students, right? So we were like, right, well, how do we hear their voices? So our student engagement team, rather than them having class reps, would go into the classrooms to gather feedback in a more holistic way. Another example would be our supported learning students who needed support in order to gather that information and feed it back to lecturing staff or those in leadership positions. So again, the common framework that we were trying to apply across a broad range of disciplines and different areas, we took a different approach. And again, our lecturers then became the people that supported those individuals to gather the feedback, to then work again with a senior leader, like the deputy principal, and she would go into classrooms and actually speak to those in those classes. So it's back to almost where we started this morning with Michelle, and it's not a one-size-fits-all, and I think we need to be much more responsive to what each of our different student bodies, our student needs are in different curriculum areas, because it is different, you know. So that's one of the approaches we've taken.
I'll try this one. I mean, I think, you know, as somebody said earlier, no, universities are awash with data. Yeah, and again, sometimes it's not about being proactive and going out and asking about new things. It's about reviewing all the data you've already got. So, you know, terrible things from, you know, student disciplinaries, what types of students are going there, what are the issues, it's support plans, which students are going to get what, have you analysed your retention data, which particular students are doing this, what groups have they come from, what colleges do they come from, what schools do they? We've got all the data. What we have to do is spend the time and care enough to review it. And I think that's probably one of the issues is, you know, Our planning functions and our institutions are set up to churn out data to HESA and churn out data to wherever. Actually, that bears no relevance at all to the students. Yeah. From a student perspective, how do we want to use the data to better improve the student experience? And that requires us to look at the data in a different way.
Got any other questions from the floor? I think it's getting to that time of the day, isn't it? Well, if we've no further questions, I think we'll draw this session to a close. But I just thought on behalf of QAA, I would just like to thank you all for your contributions today and this panel meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.